the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise. Hope reflected in our eyes.
Well, welcome back to the Unwanted Fraternity Podcast. I'm Jen Tonkinson, and I'm here with my husband, Greg. So excited that you're joining us yet again for another episode. We just want to give a quick shout out to the Herzog Foundation. We are so grateful to be partnering with this amazing organization. If you're a Christian educator, a parent, a pastor, a church leader, and you're looking for tools to help grow the next generation closer to Christ and find out different events around you, or even listen to some amazing podcasts about how you can do that, go on to herzogfoundation.com/podcast if you'd like to listen to some of their great episodes. Or if you just want to go to herzogfoundation.com, you can find an amazing assortment of tools that you can use to help grow those young people towards Christ. Well, Greg, we're back again with a deep dive into A Grace Disguised by Gerry Sitzer. And we're on chapter, oh my goodness, I'm blanking. I think it's chapter 4 now. Yes. And we left off last episode with a question, and we didn't get any time to work through that question. So I really do want to start this episode with that question, because I think it was just incredibly profound of him to even ask, and things that we don't really think about people pondering when they are going through grief, like especially from the outside looking in. And that question is this: is it possible to feel sorrow for the rest of your life and yet find joy at the same time? So I give that question to you, Greg, because you experienced great loss. And I'm assuming that at some point in your journey towards healing or recovery, or whatever you want to say with that, you had that thought pass through your mind, like, am I always going to feel sorrow? Will I ever feel joy again? Can I feel both at the same time?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, great to be on the show, Jen.
Why do you say it that way?
Because it really is great to be on the show.
Well, I'm so glad. I mean, you're on every week, so
right.
I'm glad you're here every week.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's so natural for anyone that is dealing with grief to begin to question what has never been the case, but now that all emotions are heightened, you start to second guess, contemplate in those lonely waking hours, revolving around questions like this. Whereas before your experience, before your tragedy, you wouldn't really have given that too much thought in terms of compartmentalizing or identifying certain emotions as if two emotions can't exist at the same time. So you're just living your life, and you would experience 20, 30, 40 emotions a day, and you didn't ever question, why am I laughing right now and then dead serious the next minute? Why am I crying and then laughing while I'm crying? Like, we all have done that. We've all been around loved ones, family, friends who have done that. And we never question that. But when it comes to grief, all of a sudden, you know, the 5 steps of grief, and we have to handle things a certain way, and we have to, and we begin even judging people, maybe inadvertently, but nonetheless, when they're not grieving the way we think they should be grieving, and so on and so on. And so to answer that question, yes, you absolutely can grieve and find joy simultaneously at the same time. The psalmists declare that. We've talked at length about lament psalms, and we note that they are full of raw emotion, but also complete joy. They're God, where are you? My tears have dried up. I don't know if you're listening, and I will always praise you. I will continue to praise you. I will, Psalm 13. And so the answer is yes, you can experience both. And I would even, I guess, add to that, if you're not experiencing both, it at some point will become problematic. If you deny the pain of grief, I think that is problematic. If you deny that joy can be had amidst your pain, James 1, Romans, now I'm blanking, 5, is it? I'll have to, anyway, then what is the purpose of trials and suffering? And it's joy. It's complete joy in the hope of what is to come. And so I think, yes, they're both necessary. And, honestly, it's if you're around loved ones, by the way, to our listeners who are experiencing grief, just use that as somewhat as you spend time with people. Again, it doesn't have to show up. Both of them have to show up every day in equal value. But if you're spending time with a loved one and you go, 2, 3, 4 months and they have zero joy, like they've never talked about it, they've never expressed it. And again, I'm qualifying this as believers.
Right.
And so, or if you go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months and all they have is joy without any recognition of pain because of the loss or because of the tragedy, that should be a red flag. That should be something where you just take note and pray about it for sure. God, how can I address this with my loved one? Because they're both very valid and I would say very necessary emotions and stages of grief to be in and go through.
I think when I put it to what I went through with the divorce, I had deep sorrow because my marriage had ended, and I knew it wasn't getting fixed. And I had deep sorrow because I watched my kids not understand why Daddy wasn't living at home anymore, and yet I think that with the way I would define joy in those moments when I was just broken is the peace and the comfort that comes from being with the Lord, either through prayer or through reading His Word. So it's not like what we think. I know you know this if you're a believer, but a lot of times people think joy is like happiness. Like I'm happy all the time. I have like a smile on my face and I'm bouncing around. But that's not what joy. Yes, joy can look like that. Absolutely, but it can also look like I am taken care of by the Lord in the middle of my crying and my grief and not understanding everything that's happening, but I still feel that God is with me and comforting me in different ways. And so I think that's how it manifested itself in me. So yeah, I could say that, I had both joy and sorrow at the same time, but it isn't something I actually thought about. Like I didn't go,
No.
hey,
And that's
I
when
agree with you. There's not an emotion that you you don't you don't evaluate your emotions like that. Like, can these both exist?
Not
but they can.
Normal people. You don't wake up and say, I'm going to have joy right now. And then you blink your eyes and there's joy. Like that's not how we live. I like what Piper says regarding joy. He says, it's a good feeling. And he says, by that, I mean, it's not an idea. It's not a conviction. It's not a persuasion or a decision. It's a feeling. And then he says, one of the marks of the difference between an idea and an emotion or feeling is that you don't have immediately control over your feelings or emotions. You can't snap your fingers and decide to feel something. And so again, he accents, I think, the point that there's this feeling in your soul that I would say, and it is Romans 5 and James 1 and other passages for that, fruit of the Spirit, that I like what he says there. It's a feeling in your soul that is comforting, that is reassuring, that is, and I think because it's deep because it's founded in the truth of hope.
Yes.
And so we've talked before about how our heart breaks when we hear about people not of faith going through difficult times, because we can relate on the grief side. We can relate on the feeling hopeless. We can relate on feeling angry or saddened, heartbroken, but they can't relate on feeling joy in the way we're defining joy. They can't relate in having your foundation in the hope that there is a God who is sovereign over all circumstances, including your current circumstance, and that God is someone you can trust, is a person, a spirit that you go to because you know he is trustworthy. And because of that, in those moments of despair, there is an equal moment of hope and joy. And it can be confusing, it can be complex, because even you as a person of grief, you do, like I remember many times I would honestly be not confused but perplexed as to why don't I feel worse. And again, this is like the worst season of my life, but there were several moments where I thought, why don't I feel even worse than this? Well, because I have joy, because I have hope, because I know that there's victory, that death has no sting, that death has been defeated at the cross. And because of that, while my experience, Gerry's experiences are tragic, are catastrophic, as he says, you can still have that and still and absolutely proclaim and know I have joy. And it's the non-Christian cannot understand that. It's almost inexplicable because they're so contrary. Like, why would you have that? Because the person without faith will turn to grief and the next angle, I guess, the next procedure out of grief is revenge. It is justice. It is anger. It is something or someone has to make this right. And while the Christian can empathize with that, I think we've all been through enough grief in our lives to realize it's never going to be made right in the sense of immediate justice, or the feeling like, okay, the ledger has been settled. We live with this hope that there will be a day when Christ returns, when everything honestly will be made right. And while I don't completely understand that, I live with the joy and the hope that is nonetheless true.
I think too, when you have joy, you feel, I guess there's a sense of, I know the character of God enough to recognize that he is going to take care of me, that he didn't cause this situation, and he is going to get me through it. And so there is a comfort in that. And I think that comfort feeling also is joy, like it's hope, knowing that everything's going to eventually work its way out. It's not going to be necessarily the way you had planned it, obviously now, but God's not going to leave you to it. Like he's he's not going to just say, oh, well, I'm sorry you're going through some stuff. Like, figure it out. You got to keep doing life. Like, it's a process with him. And I think that's too where the joy comes in, because you can trust him. Like you said, he is a trustworthy God, to get you through all of it and to set you up for the next step, whatever they may be. Mm-hmm. He did say something interesting, and I think you touched a little bit on it. He said denial puts off what should be faced. We know that is the definition of denial. But his people in denial refuse to see the loss for what it is, something terrible that could not be reversed. And so I was trying to think through that, like, okay, so in regards to his catastrophic loss, I don't know, like, I don't really know where the denial part sits. Like, what do people deny? Do they deny that it is? Maybe they sit in and say it's not as bad as it really is. Like, they don't want to have the emotion in their heart and mind, so they just kind of push it away and file it away in their, metaphorical filing cabinet inside their heart and say, I'll get to that later. I'm denying that exists, and I'm just going to keep doing my day to day and just pretend like I'm not sad. I think that's where he was going with that. Mm-hmm. And I thought I feel like that would feel very empty in your walk, having that denial part.
It will, and yet I can completely understand when you, as a believer, you never think you'll do something, feel something, say something, have a certain emotion or feeling about your faith, about the Lord, about your sanctification, until you're in it. And then,
that's a good point.
I don't want to say all bets are off, but pragmatically all bets are off. This is why we have to just steady ourselves in the Word of God before trials and tribulations come our way. Because Matthew chapter 7, the winds come, the rains blow. They do it to everyone, the Christian and non-Christian alike. Every human, if they live long enough, will experience the storms of life. And so when those happen, I go back to Romans 5, because when I read Romans 5 and it says, exult in your tribulations, if you're in a tribulation, that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Like, you want me to exult in my tribulation?
Yeah.
But when Paul, you keep reading, and there's a rationale to it, which is at the very end, hope doesn't disappoint because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. James, same thing. Consider it joy when you encounter various trials. And you read that, and it's like, you got to be kidding me. But then he explains, testing your faith produces endurance. Endurance has its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And again, then, James even follows up with, if you lack wisdom, ask God, he generously gives it to you. And so there is a very, very spiritual reality to Christians who go through trials, and it is completely locked into your faith. That you this isn't some random act. The act itself, humanly speaking, may have been random. Like, I'll never know why this kid hit and killed Leanne. Gerry will never know why. I mean, he knows that it was a drunk driver, but outside of that, he doesn't know why that guy chose that night, or they seem like they're just random acts of violence and chaos, and so you're from a human perspective, you look at it and think, yeah, life is just random things happen. But from a biblical perspective, you have to tie in this faith sanctification element and say, whatever else happens, if I believed James 1 and Romans 5 prior to my accident, I have to believe it during my season of grief, during the toughest time of my life, even though the words themselves are incredibly difficult to embrace and live out. I won't disagree that my faith is being worked on during this time of grief and pain. And if we can just hold on to, rather than denying the reality of my situation, lean into, I may not have joy right now. I may not consider all this joy. I may not exult in my tribulations. Maybe one day I'll get there. Right now I can't get there. But I will not deny that my faith is in play right now in terms of being perfected and completed. And if this tragedy is playing a part in that, then who am I to deny that?
Gerry says this very beautifully, the same kind of concept that you're talking about.
Yeah, he says it way better.
No, you say it great too. And
this knucklehead on a podcast.
You do a great job, Greg. I'm glad you're here. But I do want to read what he wrote, because I love the way he puts this. It says, pain is a gift because it shows we have the capacity to feel, whether pain in the body or pain in the soul. He says, what is true in the body is also true in the soul. And I think you were saying that as well. The pain of loss is severe because the pleasure of life is so great. It demonstrates the supreme value of what is lost. The screaming pain I felt at the loss of my mother, my wife, and my daughter reflects the pure pleasure I felt in knowing them. I cannot have one without the other, for both show what the soul is capable of feeling, sometimes simultaneously. That's so well put with... because he has such pleasure in life of being a father, a husband, a son, and knowing their relationship, like the way he puts it, like I can't have the pleasure of life and not experience the pain that goes with it when I lost them, because they were so good. And the opposite of that is experiencing this pain, and it's part of his physical body and it's part of his soul. But to think of pain as a gift goes back to what you're saying in James. Count it all blessing to go through trials. So the gift side of that is one, recognizing that I had something beautiful, and I like, who can say that? Like, how many people get to say, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people can, but like for his situation, like he had a beautiful thing with his family, and he recognized how incredibly precious that was. And sometimes I think when we're in the midst of life and we get going and we get busy, we forget to take a moment and stop and think like how precious this is. And when we have pain and trials, that is highly amplified in our lives because we realize that we have loss. Yeah.
And again, you know, I think many of us in the fraternity have read James 1 and Romans 5. Please handle God's word with care, especially when you're sharing verses with people who are going through grief. The verses stand on their own. Like, I don't, need to defend them. But when we take these verses and misapply them, meaning, it's been 3 months and she's still grieving over this or weeping over this, or it's been 6 months and he seems to be in this state of despair still. I'm reading James 1 or Romans 5. How come he's not finding joy in this? Or how come he's not exulting in this? Please don't use these as a means to help a fellow believer get over their grief. There's never a timeline to where we wake up and say, you should be done with this. Let's get to the joy part. Again, in my own experience, there were moments of joy, like deep, profound joy, not to your point, Jen, like smiling and happy, but rather my soul had hope. And that's what I hung my hat on so many times. When I felt hopeless, I would read James 1 or Romans 5 and know there is hope to be found. This is not the end of the story, and the story at the end in the meta narrative is Jesus wins, and I have great hope in that. So in the midst of my pain, there were literal moments where my soul was exploding with joy, but it wasn't the kind of joy where I would walk around with this smile plastered to my face. It was more of a deep, profound understanding that God has this. Like, he hasn't abandoned me or the situation or the kids or whatever. And so, again, just if you're going to encourage one another with the Word of God, just be balanced in that, be fair with that, and honestly pray your socks off that the timing is right. Proverbs tells us, like apples of gold and settings of silver, so is a word spoken in right circumstances. I think that applies here as well. Just don't text your loved one, James 1, 2-4, and say, praying for you, or, I mean,
glad you had this trial.
Yeah, because I could equally text them, Psalm 13, 1-3, and say, David gets you, and I think we're both right. Maybe just continue to seek God, like, for the wisdom you need, and what does my loved one, what does my friend, what does my coworker need in this moment? Maybe they do need Romans 5, but maybe they need Psalm 13, right? And so seek the Lord before we just start sending these verses thinking, well, the verse is true, but they may not be in a space to accept it in its fullness in the timing of it all. Well,
and I want to add to that, this, and he says this through his book, and I know you've mentioned it too, and I feel the same way. Even going through a divorce, you can get 5 years out and think everything's fine with that person, and then that person has something that brings them back, and they are feeling sorrow again, and while they have shown joy for a little while, all of a sudden they're back in sorrow, and you're looking at them. Hypothetically saying that you're looking at your friend thinking, well, I thought we kind of moved on.
Right.
No, like, for the rest of this person's life, there are going to be times of grief.
Absolutely.
And yes, that person may be able to say, like, okay, I can see God's hand moving in a certain way in my life, but it still hurts. It's still something I have sorrow over.
Absolutely.
So be sensitive to that too. I've had many conversations with friends who, they've spent many years and they've asked me, like, why do I still feel so sad? Like, I thought that I had moved past, and my response is, because you had a terrible loss, and it's okay to feel sad. And you don't want to forget that person. You don't want to forget. Yeah, right. You never will.
Correct.
And so, yeah, you're going to something's going to come up, and you're going to think about that person. I mean, even going through a divorce, there are times where I have, like, little thoughts creep up, and I'm happily married, and I love our life, and our kids are doing well. But there are times where I get this sad feeling, like, what a tragedy that my first marriage, that person I was married to didn't get it, like, missed out on so much that could have been a part of his blessing with the children and, like, working through a marriage. And it's not that I'm saying in my head, I want to go back to that person, because that's not the case at all. But it is a sadness that comes over me, because I'm sad for the idea that, 16 years ago, we stood before the Lord and made a commitment, and that fell apart. And that brings grief to me, like, that had to happen. And yet, in the same moment, I'm so very grateful that I have the life I have now.
Yeah.
It's just a very weird thing to process in your head.
Gerry's book, again, cannot recommend it enough, A Grace Disguised. if you read like the first 3 chapters or even this chapter 4, you will be roughly 45 pages into a 230 page book, and you will be drinking deep from the well of someone who understands grief, who understands pain. Please get the book. I think it's a new revised edition with, I think they even have study guides now, because it's worth anyone who's going through pain and grief. It's certainly one of my top 5 grief books written on grief. And you're 45 pages in, you'll immediately understand, this guy gets me, I get him, and my story is radically different than his. He just, as we've said on this podcast, writes in such a way that you feel like you're sitting in the same room with the guy and you're just grieving together.
I feel like he puts words to thoughts that you don't know what to put words to. As
Yep.
I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what it means
Yep.
to feel that way. Well, okay, so let's wrap this episode up. I do want to leave a teaser for the next episode because I want to get into this question because you've talked about this a little bit. I think when we first went through the story together, and you shared everything with me, but he said he imagined having the power to live that tragic day over and change the sequence of events. And even going through divorce, even going through, even having sickness or, coming like later in life and you develop a disease, so many things go through your head of what if. Mm-hmm. And so I really like to dive into the what if mentality. I think we all can relate to that in some aspect of our grief. Because there is this part of us as humans that we feel like we can control things. And if we just control this a little more, then we wouldn't have to feel this bad feeling inside. So next episode, we're going to tackle that question along with lashing out in anger and the other stages of grief that go along with that. So thanks for listening. You can reach us anytime if you want to have us pray for you, if you'd like to share your story of grief and healing. You can find our website at unwantedfraternity.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, so reach out to us and DM us if you'd like to mention something to us. We are so grateful that you join us each week for this podcast, and we want to always have you remember that you are not alone. We'll see you next time.
Turn on the mic, the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night, there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise, hope reflected in our eyes. on the mic, the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise, hope reflected in our eyes.